Hello, guys and gals, me Mudahar, and ladies and gentlemen, I love video games. I'm a gamer, capital Gamer, ladies and gentlemen. You know that, I know that. And one of the things that I love doing is playing old video games. I really feel like, a lot of the new stuff doesn't just hit as hard, okay? All right, a lot of these old games hit harder than my dad on report card day, okay? So I'm a huge fan of this kind of stuff. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when I want to get an old video game, what is my option? Especially if a company doesn't sell the video game, right? Do I just pretend it doesn't exist? No, I mean, I could go to eBay. And so I decide, I want to play a game called Manhunt 2. Now, Manhunt 2, you can't sell that game anymore, okay? It got censored a whole bunch of times. I think if you live in Australia, it might even be illegal to own. In fact, there's a lot of storefronts that just don't sell this game because it's really violent and it's really intense. Now, obviously, if I go to the old eBay, all right, Jim Bob here is selling the game for $110. Somebody's selling it for $62. By the way, no manual. Now, of course, some would say vintage Manhunt. And yeah, that makes me feel goddamn old. Now, I'm going to be real, okay? Would I spend $110? I mean, I'm a fiscally responsible adult. I think I can. But it's one of the reasons why I hate retro gaming or like, flea markets or anything of that nature. Because usually it's always somebody who is going on eBay, going on Amazon, and they're effectively, charging me these prices in real life for a video game. Now, again, the developers at Rockstar don't get benefits for this. So you know what I do, ladies and gentlemen? I do the smart thing. I go for the price of I get access to this game. Now, again, I'm not promoting piracy. I don't think you should ever do this. If you pirate a video game, there's a good chance that you have committed a haram action, and you might not enter the kingdom of heaven. But now, I want to ask a serious, genuine question. Do you think that I should go to jail for what I just did? Do you think I should go to prison? No, be honest with me. I won't get mad, I promise. For real, what do you think? Do you think that I have done something so sinful that I deserve 3 years in prison? Well, if your answer is yes, then you agree with the Italian government today. Now, this is a channel known as Once We're Nerd. Now, I can't claim that I watch Once We're Nerd because he's an Italian person and I don't speak Italian, okay? Now, of course, he uploads really nice videos, okay? He talks about these emulator game consoles, the Retroid Flip, the gosh darn history of Mortal Kombat. But then, of course, he uploads a video, and these are translations by YouTube. They reported me bye or goodbye. And of course, whenever I see that face in the thumbnail, it ain't a good look, ladies and gentlemen. It really isn't. So why is he saying they reported me? Well, apparently it seems as if the Italian government ain't taken too kindly to him showcasing a lot of these games. So what kind of sin did our friend commit on the internet? Well, he decided to showcase some consoles. So the consoles he showed were from a company that was known as Anbernic. Now, I've talked about this company before. You know when you go on Amazon, every time these gaming companies go after the small guy for downloading ROMs or like distributing ROMs, but they never go after companies like this for distributing ROMs on platforms like Amazon or places like that. You can go on Amazon right now. In fact, I'm not even just gonna say it, I'm gonna prove it to you. I'm gonna go to Amazon right now, I'm gonna type in Anbernic. So this is the RG35H or XX, and it's the handheld 64 gig TF card with all these game consoles, I guess, built in. Now again, on the top here, it's not necessarily written that I guess they're going to be delivering all these SNES, NES ROMs with you. But again, obviously, I think a lot of this has changed a little bit just to comply with Amazon's policies, right? Because I guess you just can't be that upfront about it. But the moment you scroll down over here into, say, the comment section, obviously the review images, you've got Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past running on here. You've got other various Game Boy games. This is a full multi-purpose emulator. And again, the further you go down, obviously one verified purchase over here goes very nice, darkish gray translucent color. Came with a 64 gig micro SD card loaded with OS and a ton of games. Yeah, man, I'm wondering why somebody would just buy it, because it just makes it super duper easy, right? It's It's a convenience piracy system that you can go to and immediately set up. And again, a lot of these have also been recommended by, YouTubers in the space. And again, I would say that if you're buying something like this and showing this on the internet, you kind of are inviting some level of litigation. But let's get back to the video. Now, I ain't saying I'm a Nintendo lawyer, but that looks pretty fucking close to a Game Boy Advance to me, okay? God damn. For $60, you can get access to this Game Boy Advance. In fact, it's on sale. Not saying that I promote you buy it. But of course, to go down over here, they will very, very easily remind you that this, again, is a system that supports thousands of games. Obviously, if you have 64 gigs built in and then an extra 256 gigs, you could probably store multiple generations of consoles, entire libraries on those cards. Now again, is this piracy? Is this wrong? Is this illegal? Probably so, ladies and gentlemen. I wouldn't disagree. And that was one of the reasons why our friend ended up getting tacked on by the Italian police. And this stuff isn't new. It's been happening for a long goddamn time, okay? A lot of these consoles have existed for forever, okay? They're like some of the easiest Temu gifts to buy for like people in your family. You're like, oh shit, let me buy a console with like 1,000 games on it, okay? Any kid's gonna have their minds blown away, okay? Easily. So of course, to go down into it, what happens? Well, the Guardia di Finanza comes in with a search warrant, apparently over the promotion of pirate materials. Because obviously he had a YouTube channel that is now in jeopardy because he dared to show emulated games running on these consoles. So of course, the feds raided him, I guess, and they took 30 consoles. And what's interesting is that he actually doesn't even know what exactly he's been charged with, because apparently in Italy you can run an entire investigation on somebody, and until that investigation is completed, you really don't have a complete idea of what exactly you're being entirely pinched with. But of course, obviously, he knows that he's getting hit with the reproduction of copyrighted materials. Now, again, this is a little bit different than like Sony or Nintendo or Microsoft or any of these companies that go after people for civil litigation on ROM downloads or redistribution. Again, that's a private company going after a lot of these, websites, and it happens all the time. But I think in the last couple weeks, we've seen, the US with the FBI going after like PS4 package, a lot of these Nintendo ROM sites. And now we're seeing an entire federal agency, it seems, the Italian government, going after a YouTuber for talking and showing off some of these systems. Now, you may notice this website, Vim's Lair. I've talked about it in the past, but it's a pretty heavy repository of old video game information, whether they be ROMs, manual scans, so on and so forth. Now, for a lot of organizations, they can send in legal requests to remove stuff from libraries such as this. But this is where it gets really scary, right? Because this is an individual who's uploading videos about emulators and products. And it's a lot different because, unless this YouTuber in question isn't the CEO of like Ambernick, which he most likely doesn't seem to be, or actually is distributing files or ROMs or any of this stuff, then it would be a different story. But if this is somebody just consuming products and reviewing them, that in of itself is kind of scary, because a lot of us on YouTube showcase content on the internet, right? Whether it be emulators, ROMs, video games, so on and so forth. I've never really heard of a case where an individual who actually does download and play ROMs has ever actually been punished. So this is a bit of new territory, I would say. And again, if somebody legally wants to jump in, please feel free to correct or add on to this, because it's something that I think we should be talking about. It's a pretty big jump, especially when feds are getting involved at the individual level as opposed to, the company level. Now again, what happens for this guy if the actual charges go through? Well, you get around a maximum punishment of 15,000 euros, which is no paltry sum, obviously. And of course, if you add prison time into it, you're looking at around 3 years of it. So there is obviously a chance that maybe they could investigate, go through everything, and then just drop charges, which obviously I kind of really hope for this guy, because again, he's just somebody that likes talking about retro game systems. And it is what it is, right? Like he just shows emulators. Nobody thinks, whenever they show emulated footage on YouTube, that one day they could be facing the goddamn jail cells. One day they think they could get a dick up their ass by the government and a jail, whatever in jail happens, okay? Nobody expects that, especially talking about retro video games. You know, one of the things that, like, you know, again, an analog to this is even American YouTubers. Like, one guy that I follow called RGT85, you may not know him, but, you know, he talks a lot about Nintendo stuff. But he himself, one of the videos that I watched, and dare I say, may have even influenced me buying a product because of something I've seen, it is right here. And this is a great example of these Anbernic systems.
Play around with it. Really, you're going to want to look at like video games and then settings and stuff. Looking at the settings here, basic stuff, you know, you can load from different SD cards if you want to put in your own SD card. This does come preloaded with games on it. You can adjust.
What? What you say comes preloaded with what? What games, RGT? Are they legal games? And now I'm not doing this to basically throw RGT inside this pool. I don't want him to actually suffer. I don't want anybody to suffer for this. But you get the idea. These systems basically facilitate piracy at a pretty grand scale. And I think it's just shitty that in this situation, it was actually this YouTuber that's paying the cost for this, especially considering that, according to his own words, he was never really sponsored by these organizations, or he was never really paid by this. It literally is just love of the game sailing the seas, if you will. And of course, in this bizarre world, what happens is, instead of going after Anbernic, and the reason you can't go after Anbernic or any of these companies is that they literally operate in China. So again, because they operate in China, good luck trying to ever fucking extradite a Chinese national for piracy, okay? It will never happen, okay? The Chinese will not give up somebody for that. You know, in China, you can literally create, like, you can sell pirated games on handheld systems in American markets. And really, it seems like when you're showcasing that, instead of going after companies like fucking Amazon, instead of going after companies, you know, that facilitate the distribution of this, right? Like, again, if Anbernic did not have a store on Amazon or any of these platforms or whatever, you know, if you're going to go after him, you might as well also be going after the biggest people. But I would imagine that going after a mega multi-billion corporation like Amazon probably comes with its own set of challenges that maybe governments don't entirely want to deal with. But then at that point, I think it's just really shitty to go after one person and probably induce them with jail time, possibly, just for distributing a fucking ROM. We live in a world where there's predators, there's cartel leaders, there's terrorists, there's violent criminals, serial killers, okay? And yet we're putting people that download motherfucking ROMs in a jail cell? What is wrong with society these days? I question, man. This is just insanity. And now again, what's scary about it too is, like, I've talked about retro games, I've had content that I made about it, but I've always been really careful. I'm always careful when I talk about things like piracy or emulation. You'll often notice sometimes that I never show footage of me emulating games. You oftentimes show that I'll never make real videos on products like this, because I know that ultimately they are piracy facilitators. And that becomes a real big concern to talk about on the internet. No, for me, generally speaking, these products are always a minefield to purchase. For instance, I have this PSP Go, brilliant device right here. It has all my emulation needs, okay? You know, I flick this thing up. It really only needs to be charged once a week. And thank God Pokemon didn't just fire up with its music, because I may or may not be emulating that on this device. But, you know, when it comes to a lot of these ROMs and, like, retro games, there's a reason why, like, you know, these retro systems mean a lot to me, and why I'm passionate about the subject, or emulation in general. If it wasn't for things like emulations and ROMs, you know, game preservation would be a fucking minefield, but also it really feels like in the retro gaming sphere, right? Like, whenever you want to play older games, oftentimes companies make it so inconvenient for you to purchase a lot of these older games because, you know, they just don't have storefronts for you to buy old Super Nintendo stuff from. It's one of the reasons why I think Virtual Console was really awesome back in the days of the Wii U and the original Wii and even the 3DS. You know, you could just go to this one storefront, buy your games for a few bucks a pop, and have a good time. And, you know, ever since, you know, a lot of these platforms, a lot of these, you know, places have been taken down. Realistically, for me to be able to play a lot of older games in some capacity is through emulation. And it's so convenient on devices like the fucking Steam Deck, for instance. You know, and when I see stuff like this, it just blows my mind. It really does. This guy is facing jail time. And of course, obviously his channel deletion, because he chose to showcase some fucking emulated games, man. What an insane world we live in.
You know, it would make more sense if instead of targeting the YouTuber who was reviewing this stuff for journalistic purposes, because again, it's not like he sold these products or I believe was even like given a referral code off of these products too, and I might be wrong there, but you know, he wasn't really charging money or distributing ROMs or pirated goods. But again, companies like Amazon will routinely take a lot of these listings down, but then again, these listings pop up like all these new systems with advertising 20,000, 65,000 something games. Like this is actually real, you know, piracy that is facilitated. And it's not just the company that's making money off of this, it's obviously also Amazon as a distributor taking their cut as well too. It would make more sense financially and logistically and even strategically to go after the distribution chain, or even directly, if you could, the company. Again, it's a Chinese company, very difficult to deal with a company that or a country that does not recognize copyright laws, you know, internationally whatsoever. But again, you can always go after the bigger targets around the world, and that would obviously be distribution channels like what I'm just showing you right over here. A YouTuber is an incredibly dangerous precedent, and thankfully, at least this is only the Italian government. I don't know if this could even happen in America or the United States or Canada or any other part. But then again, the world is shifting so fast, so rapidly. And if I were you, a YouTuber, if I were a retro gaming YouTuber going into the future, I'd be a little bit more careful with what I showcase and what products that I link to. Just because, you know, if I'm looking at jail time or serious fines down the road, it's better to be careful now than paying for it later.
No, I think it's wrong for, again, companies to be going so out of their way to absolutely demolish somebody from, like, you know, showcasing this kind of stuff in the first place. And again, this would be one thing if it was like maybe Nintendo DMCAing a video because he showcased like Pokemon or Legend of Zelda running on a pirate system, if you will. But no, this is like him getting raided, his stuff seized because, you know, he bought game systems with preloaded, you know, pirated video games, which sure you could say is probably not smart. It definitely wasn't. But I think the response that he's been getting is incredibly disproportionate. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think in the comment section below. If for some reason you think that he should go to jail, then you know what? I'm going to turn myself in to the goddamn authorities for emulating Manhunt 2 right now. In fact, you could probably hit me out a bunch of charges. I've emulated all throughout the years, okay? Hell, some of my best videos on this platform were recorded with footage that was garnered from an emulator. Ooh, what a shock, huh? God damn. Copyright law needs to be readjusted, man. It's insane. Anyways, I'm looking into how payment processors are slowly controlling everything in our life, and Steam is over here bringing it through the floodgates. Ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar, and I am out.